Okay, we are live. Well, I guess we're live. We're recording again. So,
Right.
thanks again, Shikha, for being here. We are basically, I think we both kind of wanted to talk about, or the feedback that we had gotten was that, hey, can we discuss what is evolutionary astrology for pure beginners, right? So, I think the audience for this is essentially going to be people who are very new to astrology or who believe in astrology, right? Who like, okay, sure, are interested in it, but are completely new to evolutionary astrology and sort of in the beginning phases of their own astrology learning journey, right? So we're going to try and not keep it too complicated and just be very simple and basic. But that's the point of this little video is going to be to introduce what is evolutionary astrology, which is a type of astrology that Shikha practices and that I'm interested in. Uh, so I'll stop there and a little bit about each other. And I think, for those of us, for the few followers that we have, who will say, I'll start with myself, then I'll pass it off to Shikha. So my name is Chand. What am I? I'm interested in evolutionary astrology and somatic healing and holistic healing. I'm trained as an internal medicine physician, but I'm moving more towards uh, holistic healing. And one of the things which has been really helpful for me uh, has been astrology, not as a predictive tool, but as a tool for somatic healing, actually. And so we are working on something called somatic astrology, which is how astrology and somatics are connected. So, anyways, I will pass it on to you, Shikha.
Thank you. I'm Shikha, and I am a budding astrologer, and I practice the Jeffrey Wolfring method of evolutionary astrology. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. What is it, and how is it different from other kinds of astrology? Um, and yeah, I mean that's about it. Astrology is very important to me for my own growth, for my spiritual growth, for going inwards, developing inner security. And that's why I find it's really helpful and a very powerful tool. And with that, let's get started.
Perfect. And just one thing before that, what we're trying to do is to try and put out bite-sized kind of. So I don't know how small our bites will be because we're both Geminis. We will talk, but
Yeah.
kind of uh, as I am trying to study evolutionary astrology, and Shika is, somebody who's ahead of me, and so I'm learning, and Shika is. This is kind of the dynamic here, and this is my way of learning, and it's like, as I'm reading, I like to like talk about it and learn more and teach in some ways. So this is part of that. So if you are also in that journey, then this will be great for you.
I'm also learning from you. I mean, this is what I mentioned in every episode we record. You introduced me to astrology. I'm here because of you.
I was the channel, right?
Yes.
Okay, so then let's start. And so what I'll do is, Shikha, like I'll just ask you, like, if you're talking to somebody who's very new to astrology, like maybe one of your friends, right? Uh, how would you introduce evolutionary astrology to them?
Yes. So that's a very interesting question because how we understand astrology also really depends on which part of the world we're coming from. Um, in the West, I understand in the US, like astrology was illegal for a very long time. But here in India, it's something that everyone grows up with. We talk about astrology nearly every day.
Yeah.
But the way we understand astrology is very different for sure. Evolutionary astrology is very different from Vedic astrology or, I don't know, like Chinese astrology, like the Bazi, or even just the Hellenistic astrology from like Western Europe or Central Asia, in the sense that it's for the first time is being able to answer the why of astrology with this method. Before, like I found evolutionary astrology in September of last year, even though you introduced me in like June. So even the months prior to discovering Jeff Bean's evolutionary astrology, to me it just seemed a little hit and miss. Like, okay, what is this? Sometimes the predictions or forecasts seemed correct, sometimes they weren't. Um, but I did not really understand why we were doing it. I didn't even think of asking why, like it's just something I've grown up with, and now it's a different way of doing this. But when I discovered Jeff Green's method, the first time I realized there is a reason, it's a purpose behind all of this. This is not random. This is not entertainment. This is not just also a mirror. It describes our journey across lifetimes. And even if someone doesn't believe in past life or reincarnation, that's absolutely fine. The interpretations will still resonate because we carry those patterns from our past lives into this life. And that's what we are here to change, to evolve in the opposite direction. And for the first time, like transits began to make sense. Like, why do we have transits? So this is evolutionary astrology. It's the art of mapping a soul's journey across lifetimes. Um, and this journey that we're talking about comes from the premise that all souls um, have come from the universe itself, which is conscious. And we have emerging research in quantum physics and neuroscience talking about how there is a universal field of consciousness that we all participate in. We don't. So, yeah, evolutionary astrology is different from other forms of astrology in the sense that it maps our journey across lifetimes. And this journey starts with us as souls separating from the source, the universe. We all come from the universe. And the journey is finding our way back to the universe. And now you may ask, why does it even happen? Why did we have to separate from the universe if we're just going to head back to it? According to evolutionary astrology, the universe is an imperfect being that is discovering itself. And this also aligns with like spiritual traditions that talk of how we are the universe experiencing itself. So when we separate from the universe and go on this journey of, just discovering what it means to be conscious or unconscious, we collecting information for the source.
Got
And
it.
there are these theories that when we die, all the memories get uploaded to the source.
Got it.
But
So
yeah, so
I think
this is
that's
a
a good
journey.
yeah, I think that's a good start, but I'm still looking at people, who probably don't have this understanding of this concept. Was that in astrology in general, what the fundamental is that, and I think this is a good point for the second slide, which is that uh, how is evolutionary astrology different? Because, and that would basically be that astrology is the birth chart basically is how the planets were aligned when you were born, exactly
Yeah,
at that time from that location, how how the sky looked, that it's a snapshot of that. And in traditional astrology, or in many astrologies, we look at that and we're able to learn about, okay, this is the personality, this person will like these things, they will have inclinations to do this, so on and so forth. And so we're looking at, what is this person. And I think what you mentioned saying, and what I also tell people, is that in evolutionary astrology you're looking at the why of the chart, not only the what, but also the why is the chart like this, right? Like,
exactly.
and I think that it relates to what you're talking about, is that the way to understand that the premise of evolutionary astrology is that we're looking at human beings not as people per se, but as souls on a journey. And so for this, people will, for this part, evolutionary astrologers believe that in reincarnation, and that the soul is on a continuous journey, and this is one manifestation of that. And when we look at the chart, we're able to see, which part of the journey the soul is in right now, I guess, and what direction it needs to go in. And I guess that's what you're trying to say, is that, which is an important point, was that we think about like source, which is like the universe or universal consciousness, and kind of like a soul is part of that, and it separates, it goes on this journey, but the whole point of the journey ultimately is to go back into source.
Exactly.
Is to, and again, not that it's kind of making a U-turn, but it's going to somehow, like, eventually, after a long time, and however long it might take, to reunite with source. And in this journey, wherever we are, evolutionary astrology is able to figure out where is this person in their journey and what direction do they need to go to. I think that's like a pretty easy framework to explain to somebody who is new to astrology, right?
Yeah, you described it perfectly.
Okay. Okay. So that is, and what you mentioned here is the art of mapping a soul's journey across lifetime. That is what evolutionary astrology is doing, right? Okay, cool. And then you mentioned here something, that how is it different? And this is kind of the same question that it answers the why of the charts and of the transits. which kind of which you mentioned. Would you want to just say a little bit about what are transits for people who might not be familiar?
Sure. So, like you said, our natal chart, our birth chart, is a snapshot of the heavens, of the stars when we were born, which is another way of saying we actually choose the moment to come into this world based on this correlation that planets have with our experience so far. So souls choose, like, yeah, we want to come into this world at this time, and this is what my chart will look like. And that lays your foundation, the blueprint for how your life will unfold and what kind of karmic history you're coming into the world with. And those planetary positions in your chart, they're fixed. They're not going to change. But after we're born, planets in the sky continue moving. And as they move, they form different angles to the planets in our chart, to the fixed positions in our chart. So they make 0 degrees, then 30 degrees, 45, 90, 135, 150. These are all important angles and they have certain meanings uh, associated with them. And this is what we call transits. So when we say transiting Jupiter in Cancer right now is conjunct my natal Mars, what it means is that my Mars is in Cancer in my chart, and right now Jupiter in the sky has come into the same position, the same degree of Cancer that my Mars is in. And that's a transit. And I'm going to experience the impact of Jupiter on my Mars for a certain period of time. That's what a transit is. Does that
Uh,
make sense?
Yeah, no, I think yeah, I think that's basically what you're saying, that this is happening. And so even in traditional astrology, when let's say this Jupiter is transiting and now is coming right conjunct the uh, Cancer, right
The Mars
conjunct,
in
you said the
Cancer.
moon, right? Mars in Cancer, right
Mars.
conjunct Mars in Cancer. So now the influence that Jupiter, that planet, that archetype of Jupiter will now, and we'll get into that later on, will have an impact on Mars. And so how Mars is acting is going to be different because Jupiter is right now right there, right? And so I think traditional astrology, or astrology, will try and explain, okay, what kind of an impact this will have, and that's something which astrologers can explain. But what you're saying is that traditional astrology is also saying, why is Jupiter coming here in the first place,
Yes.
right? Now,
So,
which for me kind of blew my mind, where I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean? Are you saying there's like a divine plan for all of this, in a way,
uh,
right? And
yeah, in
I think that's
evolutionary
what evolutionary astrology.
astrology,
Hmm.
sorry, in evolutionary astrology, transits are not random. They are perfectly timed synchronicities chosen by a soul. My soul chose that at this age, I'll need to, my Mars needs to evolve in a certain direction. And that's when Jupiter will correlate, will conjunct my Mars. And this conjunction will correlate with my experiences of how I'm evolving. My soul chose this evolution.
Got it.
It was already like, yeah, divinely planned.
Got it. I think this is an important thing, and there's another thing which to be mentioned here. And I am reading Ari Moshe's book. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, Beginner's Guide for Evolutionary Astrology, where he mentions this. And he keeps it very simple. And I love this. Is that ultimately, if this is source and the soul is coming out of it, right? Uh, there is desire which separates the soul from source, and all these desires will create your lifetime and your like different lifetimes. Ultimately, when they all get exhausted, the only desire left will be to reunite back with the source. All this to sort of explain, if this it still doesn't make sense to some people, is that the point of the soul's journey is ultimately to reunite with source, which is to realize that it is source. It is the universe manifest in itself. Is that kind of like what we think about the soul journey? That's the entire point of this. Like, you are going to go through all of this, but ultimately that is the goal, is to reunite with source. The question is, how long will
Yeah.
it take? We don't know.
And that's what shadow work and individuation is about. The journey back to the source involves shadow work, and the process of actually doing shadow work is individuation. So,
Yeah.
what happens is the souls, after separating from the universe, have two conflicting desires at all times. One is to continue separating, and one is to return to the source. And that is what creates karma. So, karma is, of course, natural law. Every action has a reaction. But karma is created by these conflicting desires. And what are the desires that keep us separated from the source? Like attachment to, say, worldly things, in an unhealthy way, not in the sense that, oh, we shouldn't love anyone or shouldn't love people, planet, or pets, but in the sense of wanting to possess them, wanting to like control them, or deriving our sense of security compulsively from external sources. These are separating desires. Wanting to commit crime or violence, on people, wanting to hurt people. These are separating desires. And returning desires are ones that, very simplistically you can think of like moksha or salvation. Then you want to become Buddha, Jesus, and there's healthy non-attachment. Like you do your duty, you care about people, you care about suffering, you participate in like revolutionary movements, all of that, but with healthy non-attachment, without compulsively depending on outcomes. Those are returning desires.
Got it. Okay, I think that's like a good thing because I do know that for a lot of people, even shadow work and individuation might be topics which people haven't really, been familiar with it. Myself, but I think that's like a good idea that shadow work is. I guess we can get into that later. Like what is shadow work? Because
Mm.
that can be a whole topic on its own itself. But kind of like healing, in that sense, or recognizing or becoming aware of who we truly are, of who the soul truly is kind of like a part of that, as what I'm assuming. Okay, cool. This is good. I did want to like say that here there was something else that he has shared, which was that, uh, yeah, I think that's kind of that's the general basic premise of evolutionary astrology, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and which is the why of charts. And now, from what I understand, there are multiple different methods. And I personally think like it might be a better idea to talk about those methods separately, but we can quickly like just skim through them right now and then kind of like get into that discussion later on
Yeah, sure.
about what are the methods. Right now, we're just basically saying that, hey, the soul is here. Oh, sorry, this is the one thing which he says that the natal chart provides context and reason for why any person's circumstantial reality is the way it is from an evolutionary point of view, which is kind of what you were saying. So basically, it symbolizes the template from which evolution can take place for any soul. It's kind of like this is where we are and where do we go from here? Um,
Yeah.
and why are we here, right? Like, why are we here? Where do we need to go? Those are the kind of the big themes of evolutionary astrology, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The other thing that I do want to say here is that, and I think we'll just give this as a disclaimer, is that even Jeff Green had said that astrology is reflective of life. It's not causative, because that was, and this is a, maybe a good discussion for the Richard Tarnas paper on for introduction to astrology, which talks about these things. But at least Jeff Green felt that it's not causative of life; it's reflective of life. I think there is an interplay happening, but we're not trying to say that we're doing this.
Mm.
So,
It's a
but yeah,
correlation, not a
correlation.
causation.
Yeah. The
The
one
causation
last thing
happens from the archetypes. Sorry.
from the archetype, causation can happen
Yeah.
from the archetype. So the one last thing which I believe astrology, evolutionary astrology, differentiates from other astrologies, that what we're also looking at is that every soul is in a different phase of evolution,
Mm.
right? And I think there are four stages of evolution, three of them
Yes.
being consensus,
Mm.
individuated, and spiritual phase,
Yes.
right? And so this was important because from what I understood was that even if two people have the same chart, and the example that Ari Moshe gives is, somebody can have a lot of Aquarius energy in their chart, which is like individual, like very like rebellious uniqueness. But if they are in a different evolutionary stage, it will manifest differently. Somebody might be, so consensus stage, individuated and spiritual states, these different states are, I think there's another part of evolutionary astrology, especially Jeff Green's evolutionary astrology, which will say that the chart can be very different because the soul is in a different phase of evolution right now,
Yeah.
right?
So Yeah, there's a great example Jeff Green had for this. So
Hmm.
the ninth house, which is like the house of philosophy, personal philosophy, the same placements can make someone, an astrologer or a cosmologist, but they can also make someone a good car salesperson. So the same placement can be manifesting very differently for different people. And do you want
Could you repeat that? Can make somebody what again?
the a ninth house placement, a ninth house of like philosophy? It can make people philosophers, astrologers, or cosmologists, but it can also manifest as becoming a very good car salesperson.
Got it. Yeah.
That's an example he had given. But the same ninth house placement doesn't manifest the same way for everyone or anywhere in the chart because it really depends on where the soul is in the four stages of evolution. Do you
Got it.
want to talk about the four stages, like briefly, since we've brought it up?
Yeah, let's just briefly touch base on them, and then that is,
Yeah,
I think, something which I wanted to make a separate video on. But we can
yeah,
just briefly, like, say, consensus, individuated, and spiritual stage.
yeah.
Uh,
And the fourth one is devolved or dimly evolved.
Timely balls. Got it.
Mm.
And
So
consensus is
consensus,
basically, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and explain that?
yeah, I mean, consensus is where it's the status quo people who don't question the status quo. They haven't
Yeah.
started asking deeper questions in life. Very simple. And at any time, like 75% of society is in the consensus stage. And of
Got
course, these stages themselves are spectrums. Not everyone is in the same place. There's consensus, then the individuated stage where souls begin to wake up. They start asking questions. They start resisting status quo. Like, okay, start talking about capitalism or oppression and racism, stuff like that. That's where you are individuating. You're like further along in your evolution. The third stage is the spirituated stage where you are ready to go back to the source. And that's the so like 75% are in consensus stage, 20% are in individuated stage, 2.5% of the population will be in the spirituated stage. It's a high level of evolution. And the
Yeah.
fourth stage is devolve or dimly evolve. Devolve is the souls for actually devolving instead of evolving. So think of Netanyahu. And dimly evolved are souls that are very new to this planet, so they haven't really adjusted. But they together make up another 2.5%.
Got it. Okay, this is very useful. No, thanks for sharing that. And I think here the point really also being that I don't, I personally don't get, I mean, from what I'm reading, I don't get a sense that one is better than the other. It's kind of like this is different stages and they have different impacts, not only on, the souls, but also on the world. And so if somebody is in a consensus stage, and I think this is a good example, like, somebody with a certain kind of very, rebellious energy or revolutionary energy, let's say, who's supposed to, that traditionally Aquarius would be like, I'm going to be unique and myself might actually be very accepting of social norms, and I know different kinds of similar charts, and I see them manifesting very differently because somebody's in a consensus stage and they're just trying to learn the social system so that they can master the social system, rise up the ladder in that sense, right? Be part of society when when somebody else who's in individual phase is rebelling in a certain way to be like, no, I'm going to be myself, and is choosing a different path, which is also goes. So, anyways, I think that was also a thing which separates evolutionary astrology from other astrologies. Like
Yeah.
evolutionary astrology will also look at what stage the person is in, because that will define the context in which this chart will come alive in some way, I believe.
Yeah, that's a very important point. Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, I think that's it. The method, maybe we'll get to it later. It might be a little bit too much for people to be like, how to, because that's like chart interpretation. But I think it's fair enough
Yeah.
to say that in evolutionary astrology, we are starting with the soul. We're starting with Pluto.
Yeah. You started
At
with
least,
Pluto.
at least Jeff Green's method is to start with Pluto,
Yeah.
right? And that's the focus. That Pluto is the soul. As you said, natal Pluto is the soul's karmic history, and the Pluto polarity point is the soul's evolutionary intent. So,
Mm.
you find where Pluto is in your chart, and that is kind of telling you what is the person coming in with, where do they need to go, rather than just what
Yes.
we look at is, I think in regular astrology is just about the north node and south node, and here the nodes are also important, but the focus is on Pluto.
Mm.
Uh, right? I think that's a simple
And
way of
regular
putting it.
astrology, they'll just go with sun, moon, rising. Here we start with Pluto and the nodes.
Pluto and the moons, yeah. Okay, cool.
So we can do the method
Okay.
another time, but glad we covered just what evolutionary astrology is and how is it different from other forms of astrology.
Yeah, and we're going to put this out, and hopefully, and then I honestly, I hope we hear from people. I'm going to send this to people, and hope they have questions. Maybe this wasn't, maybe this was useful. Maybe this left people more confused. Hopefully, this leaves them less confused about what evolutionary astrology is and more curious. But I'm hoping that people are able to put their feedback in the comments or whatever, to be like, hey, this makes sense. And if they have any questions, we can go from there. But probably starting next, would we're just going to talk about the stages and about different videos upon archetypes, as I think that's what we want to cover next, basically.
Right.
What are archetypes and all this kind of stuff. So anyways, lots more to come. uh Thank you, Shika, for your distilling your vast knowledge into to simple terms to make it accessible, because I know that that's something which isn't always easy for us when we are not interacting a lot with people at a different level in some ways, right? For
Mm.
adjusting vocabulary can be hard.